Boker Tov, Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Welcome to the Aliyah day. Glad you are here. Today we're going to be talking about the festival of Sukkot, or you might hear some rabbis out there, particularly of the more Ashkenazi way, refer to it as Sukkos, but it's actually Sukkot. It's not Sukkos. That's actually a improper way of pronouncing it. But anyway, the festival of Sukkot, also known as the Festival of Booths, or the Feast of Tabernacles, sometimes just in Judaism, just referred to as the feast or Hag, because it's considered the most joyful of all festivals. So good morning to you. By the way, is the quality of the audio different or better or worse today? Let me know. I would like to know if the words that are coming out of my mouth sound better today than they did yesterday. Let me know, please. Inquiring minds want to know. So today we're going to be talking about this festival, the joyful festival of Sukkot. We're going to learn as much as we can in the time we have about this festival, bringing out some of the halakha. And as I've been saying the last couple of days, to remember that what I'm sharing with you are all topics that might possibly be covered in the Beit Din interview for those of you who are going to go through the conversion program and you want to the final, well, not the final step, but part of the process, the near final process, is the Beit Din interview. And so you will be interrogated, and I use that term interrogated on purpose, to tell me about some of the Yom Tov festivals and so forth. Don't worry about it. All the questions that I ask you are in paragraph form. There are no multiple choice. Well, thank you, Zakin Yagal. Zakin says I definitely sound like Rabbi. Okay, very good. Well, I'm glad. Johan says better than yesterday. All right, so looks like it might be better. Yes, Sergio, you will be grilled. You'll be asked to see the things that you need to know, or you will be sent to the place where you can get the help that you need. But anyway, we're going to be talking about Sukkot today, and it's what a wonderful holiday Sukkot is. Super joyful, super just fun. Of course, we'll cover, just because we have to, a couple of things of what Sukkot is not, because some of you coming from Messianic and or Hebrew roots backgrounds may have been keeping Sukkot in a way that you thought you were doing it the way it was, but you were being, you were being led in most cases by non-Jews who haven't the foggiest idea what they're doing. And as a result, we're doing it improperly. So we're going to be talking about that and so forth and so on. Before we get there, though, let's say good morning, everybody. Hey, look, I just noticed we have Allison Cleary. Look at this. Allison Cleary, Shabbat Shalom from Australia, down under. Well, hello, Allison. Welcome aboard. Glad you are here. Welcome to the program. And Shabbat Shalom to you from Australia. What part of Australia? Let us know, please. We would love to know where in Australia you happen to be. Good morning to you, Johan. Speaking of Australia, who's actually in South Africa. Good morning, Johan. Johan, I know I just made that up. Good morning, Brenda. You are in South Africa, though. That is true. I didn't make that part up. Good morning, Sergio. Good morning, Chris and Crystal. Good morning, Alita. Speaking of South Africa, thank you so much and for your love and support. Good morning, Peaches, who's actually formerly from Georgia. Good morning, Beard of Prey and Lantern Signals and Grace and Samuel and Ariel and Rafaela. Good morning, Zahava and Hepzibah and Amita. Good to see you this morning. Good morning to you, Donna and Brenda and Lori. Good morning, Micaiah. Good morning, Shoshana Brenner. Good morning, Kathy. Good morning, Kimba Mint. Glad to see you this morning. Glad you were able to make the live. Let's see. Good morning, Greg and Jean and Zakin Yugal. Good morning to you, sir. Good morning, Kathy. Let's see here. Good morning, John. Good to see you this morning. Sarah, hope you and Shane are doing great. Good morning, Thelma. Glad you're here. Baruch HaShem. Let's see. Good morning, Kara. Good morning, Jean. Let's see. Who else do we have? Good morning, Gianna. Good morning, Daniel. Good to see you this morning. Uh, let's see. Little side benefit. I haven't said anything in a while about moving to Texas because I've been doing other things. But you should all move to Texas, and there's that. But what's another wonderful reason why living here is so great, right? Aside from all the other benefits of the community, the synagogue, the kosher markets, the mikveh, all this kind of stuff. And the answer is, from time to time, when you're out and about, you run into people you know. And we were out and about yesterday, and we were leaving a venue, and in drives Daniel. And we just were passing each other in the parking lot and saying hello. And see, small things like that are great. And that's why it's great to live in the same town, the same city, because you run into Lapidniks when you're out shopping and you're out whatever, doing whatever, and you run into Lapidniks. And that's isn't that fun? Anyway, move here. Good morning, Amana. Good to see you this morning. Good morning, Anna. Good to see you this morning. We said Allison, yeah, from Australia. Yeah, good morning. Glad to see you again. What's amazing. Obi-Wan Kenobi, good to see you this morning. Glad you're here. Allison's in the outback. Wow, does that mean you live out in the country where all the deadly things are, like the brown snake and all those terrible things? Good morning, Levi. Good morning, Todd, Linda, Lubin. Good morning. Can a physical copy be bought of the Noahide Deception, please? Good question. I think so. I'd have to look into that. But glad you're here, Todd. Good morning, Zake and Rayford. Good to see you this morning. I'll have to have my publicist get back to you on that. Charlie. Okay, he's already writing it down. But seriously, I will. Let's see. All right, I think that's everybody. Hey, welcome aboard. Glad you're here. Okay, so let's talk about really quickly. Levi, yes, you're going to be here in a couple of weeks. You're coming in for Sukkot. That's not Sukkot, excuse me. Shavuot. That is wonderful. Toda Rabbah, Baruch HaShem. Let's talk for just a brief second about what Sukkot is not. So, or what Sukkot. Okay, let's start with what Sukkot is. Sukkot is a holiday in which we live in a sukkah. Sukkot is plural for a sukkah. A sukkah is a booth, and it has to be made. Good morning, Dina. It has to be made in a specific kosher way. We live in a booth for really 7 days. It's a 7-day holiday with an extra holiday known as Shemini Atzeret / Simchat Torah. They do, in fact, occur on the same day in Israel, and that's the way we keep them. In the diaspora, it's divided into 2 days, but remember what I said yesterday, there is no such thing as an added Yom Tov. Not for us, anyway. But in any case, it's actually a 7-day holiday with an additional day, the 8th day. And theoretically, we don't live in the booth on the 8th day, although, in practical terms, we might. But in any case, we have a holiday in which we live in a booth for 7 days. And we're going to get to the living part and explain what that literally means here in just a moment. But it has to be made in a certain way. And so with that said, let me explain what Sukkot is not, especially for those of you who have come from messianic backgrounds and you've been led to believe that Sukkot is a particular event, and it's not. And so let's just get to that right quick and brush that off the table. I bring this up because a year or two ago, there was a mainline messianic leader of a big messianic group here locally, and he took a photo of his backyard, and he said something to the effect of, happy Sukkot, celebrating Sukkot, whatever he said, right? And this is a guy who, leads a big messianic group. And in the backyard, he had a Coleman, like a camping tent, like a Coleman camping tent, and a grill or something like that, and like a lawn chair. And of course, the problem is you've got a whole bunch of 99.999% of non-Jews who follow this person. And they're thinking, Sukkot is camping. And a lot of Messianics believe this. Like they have these big, some of them, I don't know how they are today, but back a few years ago, they used to have these big Sukkot events, almost like almost like a Woodstock or Sturgeon or something like that, where people go out to these campgrounds, state parks. Some of them are huge, and they have hundreds, sometimes thousands of people who go out there with their camping tents and RVs, and it's like a big. Frankly, it's just a big cultish camping event, like Children of the Corn, only not in a cornfield, and so it's just weird. Okay, but all right. So for those of you who used to do that, used to do the Messianic Woodstock, I'm here to tell you that that is not Sukkot. And as a Jew, we Jews look at that and go, woohoo, kooky. Um, a Coleman tent or a camping tent of any kind is not a sukkah. A pop-up tent, like the 10 by 10 or whatever pop-up tents, is not a sukkah. A pergola on your back porch is not a sukkah. A sukkah has to be a kosher sukkah in order for it to be a sukkah. And we Jews don't go out into the wilderness and camp on Sukkot. We build the sukkah in our backyard. And in Israel, sometimes they build it on the veranda or the patio, because a lot of the people live in high-rise apartments over there. That's kind of just the way it is. But the sukkah should actually be built in your backyard, not at Yosemite National Park or the grasslands of Oklahoma. It should actually be in your backyard. And you're supposed to live in it. You're supposed to, and again, we'll get to that in a moment. In any case, by the way, can camping be fun? Yes. Keturah loves it. Keturah is a high-end primitive camper. If you don't know what that is, you'll have to ask her, because I don't either. But she's a primitive camper. She's like a backpack, bedroll, under the stars. I don't even think she uses a tent. But she's really big into that. But so camping can be fun, and but that's not what Sukkot is. And so one of the things that's interesting about Sukkot that is really different than all of the other festivals. First of all, it's a festival of ingathering, which is interesting in itself. But the other thing that's interesting about Sukkot is it's the only festival. It's really the only activity whereby we get to enter into it, so to speak, with our entire being. Okay. Meaning that you build a sukkah, a kosher one, obviously. And then when you enter into the sukkah, you're entering into that edifice with your body, soul, and spirit. Like your entire essence, your entire being is in the sukkah. And I will tell you, just as a side note, that there's a lot of kedusha. There's a lot of power. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of divine essence by just dwelling in a sukkah. And so sometimes, and of course, this is a holiday I should also mention that is really, really focused on hospitality, the ushpazim. And so inviting people to the sukkah is a wonderful mitzvah. And listen, all you need to do is invite people to come to your sukkah to have a cup of coffee, to have a glass of wine, to have a, dare we say, a little bourbon, and perhaps a cigar. But in any case, they just come and sit in the sukkah. Sitting in the sukkah brings a lot of healing. It brings a lot of kedusha, it brings a lot of divine power and energy just by sitting there for 5 minutes and having a cup of coffee. Why? Well, it brings down in tractate Sukkah. We have learned regarding the verse, for in Sukkot booths I shall settle the children of Israel when I remove them from the land of Egypt, Leviticus 23:43. The sukkah booth were the clouds of glory that were. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Akiva says yes, and they also made themselves actual sukkah booths. So in other words, what's being brought down here in the tractate, and this is why just dwelling in a booth, as I just mentioned, is so powerful, is because the booth itself represents the clouds of glory. Okay. It's so like when you're sitting in the booth, it's as if you're sitting in the divine presence. Okay. Now, a couple of people have mentioned here. I see on the chat. Let's see what Leah has to say. Multiple years we were camping in freezing rain, snow, high winds. Remember one year it was like 15 degrees, but we stayed out camping. Yeah, I've camped in 18 degrees, I think is the coldest I've ever actually been out. And when I say camping, it was back in my reenacting days, and it was very primitive. There was no, I had a blanket. There was no sleeping bag. Sergio says, we had downpour one year. It was not fun. All right, these are good points. So we're supposed to live in the sukkah, dwell in the sukkah when it's comfortable. So if this is not a test of endurance. This is not this is not Survivor. This is not the Jewish Survivor or whatever. If it's pouring down rain, or if it's snowing, or if it's blistering hot, you do not have to stay in the sukkah. You're supposed to be in the sukkah when it's enjoyable to be in the sukkah. Okay. And that's an important thing to mention. Like if you can't, you don't get extra credit for, it's pouring down, there's thunder and lightning and hailstones hitting you in the head, and you're like, but I'm in my sukkah. There's not extra credit for that. In fact, it would be a mitzvah in that case not to be in the sukkah. You're supposed to be in the sukkah when it is comfortable. Something else that the sukkah represents is, interestingly enough, of course, freedom. Okay. So it says here, on Shavuot, God told his nation, Israel, the purpose of its freedom. We live in the booths to symbolize this freedom. But what is the purpose of freedom? Okay. Because Israel had accepted the Torah, the seeds planted in the springtime of the Exodus were harvested for a useful purpose. Otherwise, the crop of freedom would have become the rot of license and self-indulgence that has corrupted and destroyed so many civilizations. Now, does that sound familiar, what I just said? In other words, what's being brought down here is that during Shavuot, we are told what is the purpose of our freedom from Mitzrayim, from Egypt. The purpose of our freedom is to dwell with Hashem under the cloud of his holy Torah. Otherwise, if we don't have a purpose for the freedom, if the purpose of freedom is simply to be free, then that will lead us to live a life of basically sin. And isn't that what we see today? People who run around saying the Son has set me free. I'm no longer under the law. And what are they doing? They're all sinning. Every one of them. They're literally living a life of sin. Okay. So Sukkot is symbolic of us submitting our life to God. Now, how do we do that? What's one of the ways that we do that? Well, it's brought down here in one of the commentaries that it's the sukkah, in addition to being the clouds of glory, is also known as the shelter of faith. Why? Well, because the sukkah it's a makeshift construct. It's not very stable. I mean, it's stable enough, but we've had plenty of Sukkot festivals in which seemingly it always is the case at one night of Sukkot somewhere, there is usually a thunderstorm that rolls through, at least in our area. And one of the reasons for this is because Sukkot occurs here in Texas at a time of year where the weather is changing. And so it seems almost inevitable that during Sukkot, you're going to have a good rainstorm or perhaps a good thunderstorm that's going to roll through. And the next morning, I'm out, finding the schach. I'm out, lifting up tables that have blown over and that type of thing. So in other words, the structure itself is not like a brick building, of course. And therefore, when we live in it, when we put it up and dwell in it, we're making a statement of faith, a statement of bitachon, of trust, a statement of emunah, in which we're saying that we're choosing to live in a structure that is not super secure, but rather is temporary, and we're saying that we're putting our faith in Hashem and in His divine presence. We're choosing to live in His divine presence. It says here, the sukkah was an allusion to the impending greatness of the future. In this sense, our own sukkah reminds us that the suffering of exile is itself temporary, that it too will give way to the redemption and the third temple, maybe sooner or time. Undoubtedly, the tabernacle, it says here, of the wilderness contributed to this illusion, for it too was a makeshift portable building that was dismantled whenever the nation traveled. It was the divine presence, temporary dwelling, until the permanent temple would be erected in Eretz Israel. We could also say that the tabernacle reminds us of our temporary dwelling, our physical being. This body we're in is a temporary dwelling. Incidentally, I forgot to mention something at the beginning of our broadcast here, and that is that today is Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, which is the time in which the plague that was killing Rabbi Akiva's the disciples ended. Is also the Yetzirah of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who is the author of the Zohar. And I just want to mention that as we're talking about, Lag BaOmer or the day and so forth. This is a nice statement about the shelter of faith from the perspective of the Zohar. Speaking of the Zohar, being Lag BaOmer, it says the Zohar refers to the Sukkah phenomenon as Zila Dimheminata, the shelter of faith. People can be surrounded by divinity, but unless they believe in God's protection, they are naked to their enemies, exposed to every marauder. Rabbi Bachya notes that the very word sukkah alludes to the higher degree of spiritual perception acquired by Israel in the wilderness. In interpreting the name Yiska, the other name of the matriarch Sarah, the sages said, why was Sarah called Yiska, another name of Sarah? Because she saw, Yisko, from the root sukkah, to see, the Holy Spirit. This comes from Sanhedrin 69b. The word sukkah can be related to the same root, and indeed, the ancient sukkah, formed by God's cloud of glory, that is the one the Zohar calls the shelter of faith, was the history's outstanding manifestation of an entire multitude gaining a superhuman insight into God's guidance of human affairs bound with the past. In other words, the root of sukkah can mean to see, like a prophecy. So when we come to the sukkah, we gain prophetic insights. Something else about the sukkah. By the way, there's a comment here that says the birth of a nation is meaningless without a sense of purpose. Boy, it's talking how the Torah is our sense of purpose, and here we're talking about an aspect of the Torah, which is living in a booth. Now, we talked about living in a booth. What does that mean to live in a booth? So it says here in the halakha regarding the sukkah, the essence of the mitzvah of sukkah is to establish one's residence in the sukkah for the duration of the festival. The Torah commands us to dwell in a sukkah for 7 days, Leviticus 23:42, meaning that any activity normally done in one's home should be done in the sukkah. Thus, one should eat, drink, sleep, and pass one's time in the sukkah. If he wishes to converse with his friends, he should do so in the sukkah. However, in deference to the great sanctity of the sukkah, one should refrain as much as possible from idle talk while in it and devote his time to Torah and matters of sanctity. One should treat the sukkah, well, we'll go to that in a second, but let's dwell on this for a moment, no pun intended, that everything during the week of Sukkot, you're to the extent possible, again, if it's raining or sleeting or hailing or whatever, we don't have to be out there, but whatever we're doing that we normally do at home, as we just said, we're supposed to do in the sukkah. So you get up in the morning, you fix yourself a cup of coffee, you're going to listen to the Aliyah day, you do that in the sukkah. Lunch, dinner, breakfast, etc., all in the sukkah. Conversations, chats, your daily prayers, the waving of the lulav, all of that's done in the sukkah. And of course, sleeping. A lot of people, it's very customary, especially in Israel, to actually put a cot out in the sukkah and to, in fact, sleep in the sukkah. And I've done that before, and it's very interesting. Very, it's like camping, of course. But we live in the sukkah, that we dwell in the sukkah. We have conversation of the sukkah. But as we said, remember what the sukkah is. The sukkah is like the tabernacle. It's the place of divine glory. So it's not just a tent. We're supposed to treat it with divine respect. Sergio asked a good question. We're going to be talking about the lulav here in a second, but does each person need a lulav, or only one for family? Only the men use the lulav, and so all men in the family need a lulav. A man is somebody who is 13 years of age or older. So if you have a son who is 13 or 14 or 15 or whatever, they need their own lulav. But women do not wave the lulav. It is a male thing to do. It says here, one should treat the sukkah with the greatest respect and endeavor to adorn it as much as possible. One's finest table utensils should be used in the sukkah. Pots and pans should never be brought into the sukkah, and dirty plates should be removed immediately after eating, but drinking utensils may be left there. So we build the sukkah, and we decorate the sukkah, and that's, of course, part of the fun, part of the festivities, to decorate the sukkah, to make it actually quite luxurious with deco and with finery and so forth and so on. The most important part about the sukkah, by the way, is what's known as the schach, and that's the roof part, which is basically thatch. It's supposed to be an open roof where it's enough to have shade, but you can see out. This is the principal reason, incidentally, why a camping tent or a pop-up tent is not a sukkah. Okay. Now there is a pro tip here. There's a very easy way to have a kosher schach. And you build your sukkah, and there's different kits, by the way. You can make your own sukkah. You can order a kit and have one done that way. But the easy way to make a kosher schach, okay, is, for those of you who live in the United States, you go down to Home Depot or Lowe's in the garden center area, and they have, usually they're 8-foot long, what do you call them? Bamboo poles. Usually these are for making fences and so forth, but they're bamboo poles, 8-foot long. And you put bamboo poles up as your support for the roof of your sukkah. And you can use zip ties or whatever to secure them up there. Also at Lowe's or Home Depot, they have these, what are they called? They're reed mats. Sometimes they're made out of bamboo also, but other times they're reed mats or reed fencing. Okay. And they're in a roll. They're used for natural fencing and so forth and so on. They're actually been deemed kosher to use as schach by the Chicago Rabbinical Authority. And you buy that reed roll, that reed fencing. Usually they come in 25-foot rolls. I think they're about probably 6 foot tall or so, thereabouts. And again, I think they also have them in bamboo. And basically you on the top of your sukkah, you just put the bamboo poles up there, and then you just roll out that reed fencing. It rolls out like a mat, like a carpet. And you roll it out. Maybe you get 2, depending on the size of your sukkah, of course. You get 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it is. And that is kosher schach. And now you can throw a thatch up there if you'd like to, if you happen to have like some palm thatch or whatever, that's great too. But that is in fact a kosher schach. And the schach is the most important, halakhically, the most important part of the sukkah. You're welcome. All right. So moving on here, we have also, of course, the what do you call it? The lulav. Okay. The lulav are the 4 species. What Sergio just asked about the lulav. And the lulav consists of the palm branch and the willow, and of course the esrog, um, and the myrtle. I just almost went blank there for a minute. And so these are the 4 species. And man, I tell you what, one of the beautiful things about Sukkot is when we get to order our lulav, and we order them from a particular vendor we have used for years, and they're really, really great. And the esrog and the lulavim, they all come from Israel. We get them in here at the synagogue, and then people pick them up. Typically, they're here by Yom Kippur, and at the end of Yom Kippur service, typically people are able to pick up their lulav that they've ordered. And the fragrance of the esrog is just, it's indescribable. It's such a beautiful, wonderful fragrance. It's addicting. It's so amazing. And you get your various elements of your lulav, you put them together, and then you have those for the next holiday, which is soon coming, of course, Sukkot, to wave them. What's interesting here about one particular notation about the lulav: once you put the lulav together in the way it's supposed to be done, naturally the lulav has to be a kosher lulav and kosher esrog, and there's lots of halakha about this we don't have time to get into, but it's the lulav and the esrogim that are selected and used for this holiday are meticulously inspected, so forth and so on. It's not something that you would want to get from a non-Jewish vendor, okay, obviously. And they have a lot of holiness, a lot of kedusha that comes with them. But when you put it all together, the way that the palm branch is made, it's the palm branch is kind of like it looks like a spear, actually. And so it says here, according to Rabbi Avin, from Vayikra Rabbah, the Midrash Rabbah of Vayikra 30 and Siman 2, the spear-like lulav is an allusion to the triumphal stance of Israel, which emerges victorious from the heavenly judgment of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The commentators elaborate on the idea that only one who has cleansed himself through repentance is capable of being imbued with a message of faith and joy of fulfillment, which is represented by Sukkot. So the reason that we have Sukkot to begin with is because, and the reason is it's so joyful, it's an incredibly joyful holiday. The reason it's so joyful is because we have just been forgiven, we've just been cleansed, we've just been purified, we've just been renewed, vis-a-vis Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And one of the reasons why we wave the lulav is because we are waving it in joyful adoration of this experience that we have just undergone. Okay. And so we, of course, there's a halakhic way in which to wave the lulav and so forth and so on, but we're doing it because we're waving it in triumphal victory. And I love, as a guy, as a man, I appreciate looking at the lulav and say, yes, it looks like a spear, and the palm itself actually is rather sharp. You do have to be kind of careful, but it's like a spear, which I think is great. Now, here's another insight, just to read something here that I highlighted. It says the 70 offerings, because there were during the festival of Sukkot, when the temple was standing, maybe rebuilt in our day. There were 70 offerings that were brought, and it talks about the importance of those offerings as it relates to the nations. And Sukkot is one of those holidays which is particularly focused on the Gentiles, in that we're trying to protect them, reach them, draw them in. And this is why it talks about it for all the people out there who believe the lies of Paul, that the law had been done away with. This awkward, when you read Zechariah 14, it talks about how all the world will be keeping Sukkot. How is that? How is it that all the world will keep Sukkot when Paul told us that the law had been abolished? How is it in Isaiah 66 it says the whole world will be keeping Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh when Paul told us it was abolished? How is it that, referring back to Zechariah 14 and Isaiah 66, it tells us that the whole world will be eating kosher? In fact, everybody's pots and pans will be sanctified. They'll be koshered, just like the utensils in the temple. It says that in black and white in the scriptures. Isaiah 66 says that God is going to throw into outer darkness the people who don't eat kosher. It says that in Isaiah 66. How is that? And this is the end times, by the way, in the Messianic age. How is that possible if Paul told us the law has been abolished? How is that possible? How is it possible in Zechariah 8:23, where it talks about that the nations are going to take hold of the seat of a Jew and say, we want to go with you because we heard the Lord is with you? Well, how can we be wearing seat if Paul told us that the Torah has been abolished? How is that possible? I'm confused. It says here, the 70 offerings of Sukkot display Jewish concern for all humanity. The Jewish national title, Yeshurun, from the word yashar, upright or just, means those who make others upright. Isn't that interesting? Our title as Jews is Yerushun, and it means that we make others upright. We're supposed to help others come to truth. It expresses the national mission to bring the message of justice to the world at large. Where to refer only to Israel's own status as an upright nation, the word would have been Yesharim, upright ones. But instead, it's Yeshurun, which means that it is our duty to help others become just. By the way, speaking of keeping the Torah in the end times, the Bava Basra 75a brings down that the Holy One, blessed be He, in the future will make the Sukkot festival of the righteous, the Sukkot that we would dwell in, out of the hide of Leviathan. That in the end days, we will be living in a booth celebrating. It's interesting. To put it in Christian terms, the wedding supper of the Lamb is actually Sukkot. And we will be having that wedding supper, which evidently will be fish, in a sukkah made out of the hide of Leviathan. But I'm confused because I thought Paul said that the law has been abolished, but yet when we're sitting at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and King David, and King Solomon, and Joseph, and Mordecai, and Esther, and Ezra, and Nehemiah, and all the other beautiful people, we'll be sitting in a sukkah. That's interesting. How is that even possible? So you shall all live in a sukkah made out of the hide, as it were, of Leviathan. Okay. So we talked about Ushpazim, not just the movie, although it is considered a mitzvah in Lapid Judaism to watch the movie Ushpazim. But during the festival of Sukkot, every night we invite spiritual guests into our sukkah, beginning with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and King David and so forth. We invite the Ushpazim, but it's also a mitzvah during Sukkot to have people come to your sukkah. This is a great holiday to invite your friends and neighbors to. And again, when I say invite them, I'm saying, hey, let's have a cup of coffee and we'll come sit in the sukkah. We'll maybe it's just come have a glass of wine with us. Come have some whiskey with us as we just enjoy sitting in the sukkah. And it's amazing the spiritual power that is being infused into your friend, your neighbor, that you simply invite into your sukkah. It's considered, again, a big mitzvah to have people over for the Sukkot holiday, and so forth and so on. There is a statement here about the joy of the festival, how it was called Hag, just the feast, because it was so full of joy. During the festival of Sukkot, we take the lulav, we wave them in a certain way, and we have what's called the circuits, which we sometimes in the synagogue we would go around the bima, which represents the altar. But this is done in remembrance of the water drawing ceremony, which every day was done. There was one circuit done around the altar, and the water poured out on the altar. And then on the last day, Hoshana Rabbah, that was done 7 times. And when we have our Hoshana Rabbah service during Sukkot here at the synagogue, the gentlemen gather and we go around the altar, the bima, 7 times. Which this is a little plug here for you guys who are listening. This is why there's so many holidays. Well, first of all, you should move here. Okay, so that way you can come to every holiday and you don't have to pick one or two. So move here, move here, move here. And if you're thinking about move here, you should move here. Having said that, there are people who think, when should I come to visit until I move here for various holidays? And, of course, there's tons. Like we have Purim, which is so fun. And then we have, of course, Passover, which is amazing. And I would have to say that if you had to, back me into a corner and say, which one should I come to? I would say, well, maybe Sukkot is the best one. And the reason for that is because it's a wonderful holiday. You get to dwell in the sukkah with us. But you get to experience Hoshana Rabbah and join the minyan of men with the lulav, which is such a powerful experience. And then, of course, you have Simchat Torah, which is in which everybody, women included, get to dance with the Torah, which, of course, is the highlight event of the year for most people. So it's really powerful. But there's something else about Hoshana Rabbah. We talked about Rosh Hashanah being a judgment day, and Yom Kippur being a judgment day, and Yom Kippur being the final day of judgment. But Hashem in His grace gave us another day that is equally important, and that is Hoshana Rabbah. Hoshana Rabbah is the day that whatever judgment was made for you on Yom Kippur, it's on that day that judgment is delivered, so to speak, to the court officials, meaning that it's kind of like in a regular criminal or whatever case, and here the court makes a decision, and then the clerk of the court will take that decision and officially input it into the system. Well, Hoshana Rabbah is the day that decision is being walked, so to speak, to the clerk of the court. And as a result, it is the final day of Teshuvah from this entire experience that began in the first of Elul. This is why Hoshana Rabbah is so important, because if there's something left on the table and you did not repent properly, this is the day where, if, God forbid, that was an evil decree that's going to be submitted for the record, that evil decree can be torn up on Hoshana Rabbah. And that is why it is such a powerful day. And then finally, I would just say in a conclusion here, the time we've had together today, that we have Simchat Torah, which is a part of Shemoneh Atzeret, which is the 8th day of the festival, which is really kind of a festival unto itself. And we dance with the Torah, we celebrate the Torah. Simchat Torah means, basically rejoicing in the Torah, because it is at the end of Festival of Sukkot that we begin the reading cycle all over again. So therefore, Sukkot is also, in addition to everything else we've said, a symbolism of rebirth and renewal and joy going forward as newborn creations. End of our Aliyah today. There's so much about this topic. I have other teachings that I've done on Sukkot, and I encourage you to check those out and listen for other insights and things that we may not have shared here. Thank you so much for being here. Shabbat Shalom. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow in the synagogue as we continue our Gospel of Genesis. I'll be talking about Bezrat Hashem, Melchizedek. Also want to mention that next week I will not be here. Rebbetzin and I are going on vacation. We're going on vacation to celebrate a little ahead of time, but we're celebrating this year 30 years of marriage, and we're going to go have a good time together in an undisclosed secret location. So I will not be here at all week long, nor will I be here for the Shabbat service. That is going to be handled, the drosh anyway, by Zakin Yagal. Dun, da, 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 da. And next week's Aliyot will be handled by the Zakins, by the Hazan, and by the Gabai. They will all be joining together to help you out on the Aliyah. So looking forward to that. But I just want to give you that as a programming note. So God bless you guys. Please sure and like this video, share it with all of your friends, subscribe to our channel. Again, y'all been doing a great job of leaving comments on the video. And again, it's very, very helpful. It just really, really helps people connect to the channel, and all those things, the likes, the comments, the shares, those are all things that really, really help. And I'm very, very grateful. Love you guys. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Until then, Shabbat Shalom and a happy Lag BaOmer.